Yeah, so the last track is called You and I in Unison, and it is much more specifically about the author than the previous song. It's the point in the record in which that loss is discussed in the most detail. It's never laid out exactly what that loss was. Like I said before, it's obviously some sort of relationship with someone, most likely some sort of romantic relationship. Can't really escape that topic of conversation in our songs. But it's him. He never, it never says exactly what happens, only that it did, and only that it's affected him deeply. And the last song is kind of a personal reflection and examination on that loss, where it starts off with him kind of detailing the story. Well, first off, it starts with him saying, what am I going to find to give me a purpose? What am I going to find to help me get through this and let it go, or let it become a less substantial part of me? And then goes into him kind of detailing the story, talking about how since that loss, it's never felt like there was a complete detachment. It's always felt like that person has been there. And that's part of what's made it so difficult to continue on or to move on from there. And as it goes on, it kind of comes to this final conclusion that I don't think it's about, like I said before, I think we wanted the record to end on a more ambiguous note than in our previous full length. We wanted it to be kind of open-ended and be kind of lack definition, because I think that's the way it is. That's much more the way the world works, the way things function. There's no, like we said before, there's no formula, there's no path to take, there's no set of rules to determine how to cope with tragedy and how to move on from something that has affected you as deeply as a loss like that does. So it doesn't really ever say exactly. It kind of ends by saying, kind of throws away both ideas. It kind of throws away just completely letting it go, and it throws away continuing to live only in that thing, that loss. And it kind of says, and I see, that's the thing, like, I'm so bent on it being ambiguous and it being up to the person hearing it that I don't even want to propose a possibility. I think it's there for people to evaluate and to attach their own meaning. I think that in the end of the song, it doesn't really say. It just says, if I'm able to move on, I will. If that's the path that I need to take to be better, that's the path I'm going to take. But if that's not what happens, I'm going to be okay regardless. I'm not going to only consider one option. And yeah, it's whatever comes. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an eloquent way to put it, and I don't know that there is, but I think it's, like I said, I'm not considering only one option in the end. If I am able to sever you from me, if I'm able to remove this part of myself, or if that's what I have to do, if I have to remove you from me in order to be okay, I will. If that's the way things work out, I won't fight it. But if I'm always going to be fixated upon this loss, if I'm going to always be woven into the purpose and meaning that stem from that relationship, then I'm always going to be. And it doesn't ever say what's the right path or what's the best option. Because like I said, I don't think there is. I don't think there's one way to go about things. And I don't think actively pursuing one is the proper way to reconcile with what you've come to in life, if that makes sense. Just throughout the record, there's so much talk about purpose and about different ways that the characters in the stories are able to make sense out of a world that so often doesn't make any. And it's so much of the author dwelling on those things and the way that other people are doing things. There's no recognition of what we were just talking about, that there isn't necessarily one specific path, and that everybody, in the song previous, it talks about how everybody comes to something. Everybody reaches this point in their life where everything gets derailed, or some things get derailed, and it's all to varying degrees. Everyone experiences life differently, and accordingly, everyone has to figure out how to cope with that and to find purpose in their own way. And we didn't want to go out and say that there was, one way to make sense of it. And I think in some ways we did, and I still hold the things we talked about on the record to be very true, at least to me and to the five of us. And but there's no universally applicable rule to how to walk through the fire, I guess, to borrow an image. But it's Yeah, every situation's different and every person is different and everyone copes differently. Everyone, I don't know. I think that's a big part of what the song is about and about what the record is about, is that in the end, there's all these proposed plans for getting over this thing, the loss that's discussed. Yeah, that there's all these different ideas about how to find purpose and different ways in which other people have or haven't. And in the end, it's none of those things. It's not. He doesn't sever ties. He doesn't find a stand-in. He doesn't find a replacement. He incorporates what's happened to him into who he is as a person in the way that I think everybody on the record, every story on the record, and everybody has to in order to survive. Cutting it out isn't the right way, and distracting yourself isn't the right way. But at a certain point, the recognition is that this is how my life has gone to this point, and there's nothing I can do to change that, and there's nothing I can do to erase the past. This is who I am as an individual, and that includes the suffering as much as it does the joys and the positive memories. It's everything that happens to you. Everything that's gone on before is what's brought you to that point, whether or not you had a hand in it or not. And to me, and again, this is only to me, and that's why I can't say this with certainty because I'm not anyone else. But to me, that's a big part of being happy after the fact, is just recognizing that it happened and there's nothing you can do to change it. And maybe it's, and how you incorporate that into who you are as a person is different from case to case, I'm sure. But in the end, for the author, it's just recognizing that you can't change what's happened, and in some ways you can't change what's going to, but you shouldn't let that fact frighten you into not living your life and not looking, not trying to survive and find a purpose. I think that brings up another good thing about just the whole structure of the record. Just from the whole, like, one of the initial thoughts that spurred the concept of the record was the idea that on a lot of occasions, what an author or an artist or, whatever, a musician, painter, chooses to talk about or chooses as a subject is very often a result of a specific instance in their life that made those things relevant. And all the stories on the record are relevant in some ways because of this loss that is woven throughout. And that's kind of another representation of what you were just talking about. Like, at the end of the record, it's about incorporating these everything. It's about incorporating all your tragedies and all your joys into who you are as an individual. And the whole record is a manifestation of that, where the annotations throughout the stories are just showing how all these situations have affected the author that's telling them. And in the end, those are the things, along with everything else that's not discussed, that make that person who they are at that moment in their life. It's everything that's happened. So it's just kind of another representation of that. It is open-ended, but it is conclusive. It's conclusive in that it shows an end result. It's open-ended in that it doesn't necessarily show how that's achieved, or doesn't necessarily, pick one path as the correct way to achieve it. But yeah, every individual experience is different from every other. But that end result is something that is in some ways universal.